Hi, I'm Trevor Kann, and today I'll be presenting this work of mine in collaboration with Lujo Bauer and Robert Cunningham, my advisors from Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh, respectively. I myself am from Carnegie Mellon as well, and this is CoCoT, or Collaborative Contact Tracing, and this work was accepted into the 2024 CODASPY in Porto, Portugal, hosted by the ACM. And you can find the link to the paper in the description. And so in this talk, I'll first give a sort of background on contact tracing, its history, as well as modern technology as a tool for containing pandemics. Then I'll talk about our contribution, CoCoT, which uses collaboration to improve contact tracing in the modern day. And then I'll talk about our quantitative evaluation on human interaction data. And finally, I'll talk about one of the trade-offs that we make to achieve our improvements. So as a bit of brief history, contact tracing is the process of identifying and monitoring known and potentially infected people, with the goal of slowing the rate that a disease spreads in order to halt it in time for a group herd immunity or a vaccine to be developed and minimize the number of infections or even deaths. And is a very valuable tool for healthcare authorities whenever there's an epidemic or a pandemic to save lives and prevent harm. So as an example here on the right, we have the giraffe, who's our healthcare investigator, and he is talking to the turtle. And we know the turtle has been infected, so they are our index case. And the giraffe is going to ask the turtle about her recent interactions with anyone who she may have met. And specifically, they're going to ask, who did you see and how did you interact with them? In this case, the turtles recently had lunch with the dolphin and the flamingo. The healthcare investigator is then going to triage among those contacts who the healthcare investigator thinks is a significant risk of infection. And in this case, the healthcare investigator thinks that both the dolphin and the flamingo are at a risk of infection. So they're going to go talk with the dolphin and the flamingo and tell them about their recent exposure and have them self-isolate and test for illness. And in this case, unfortunately, the dolphin is also sick. The dolphin then becomes a new index case, and the giraffe repeats this process recursively. They're going to then interview the dolphin about their recent contacts and how they interacted with them, and then go meet with and test those contacts. Ideally, this process happens before the dolphin is infectious or shows sign of infection and potentially infects other people, therefore slowing the rate of disease transmission. Then we're going to break down these questions that the healthcare investigator asks into two parts, which I kind of mentioned already. Who did you interact with and how? And we're interested in aerosolized viruses and doing distance-based risk assessments between those. So we're going to ask how closely. And you may have seen this recently in the news as 6 feet or 1 meter for 15 minutes or longer. And so manual contact tracing has been around since the Black Plague, but in its modern form, it's been around since the 1918 American influenza epidemic, so a little over 100 years. And it still proves to be useful in modern times with the AIDS outbreaks, the AIDS epidemic, SARS outbreaks, tuberculosis outbreaks, etc. It's still a very useful tool even in today's terms. But with recent advents, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, we see that contact tracing, as it's currently done manually, can often be quite slow, which for a fast-spreading illness like COVID can be an issue. And the reason it's slow is because it takes a long time for these healthcare authorities to train up these skilled investigators. And it's a lot of work per individual case for these investigators to meet with these index cases, track down their contacts, meet with them and test them, and do this for many, many potentially infected people. Furthermore, for very fast spreading, especially airborne aerosolized illnesses, such as COVID, it can be reliant on human memory, and that can be an issue. For example, if the turtle didn't remember every single person they passed by, or maybe that they didn't know someone who they saw on the bus. In recent times, automation has been proposed as a way of mitigating a lot of these scaling issues. Specifically, you can utilize the ubiquity of smartphones in many countries to help the healthcare investigator with a lot of their footwork. And these phones are really great at answering the who question of the healthcare investigator's work. They're great at detecting other nearby phones or contacts if they're in someone's pocket, and they can remember those contacts and later inform the contacts of potential risk of infection. But They don't answer that second question, the how closely, very well at the moment. If the phones use something like GPS to determine where they are, and then later collaborate with other phones to determine who's nearby, it can be quite privacy invasive and lacks the necessary accuracy. And the reason it's privacy invasive is, let's say the turtle had to escape their enclosure to go to lunch with the dolphin and flamingo. If that gets out, the zookeepers might know about this and might further restrain the turtle's enclosure, make it harder for the turtle to get out in the future. Alternatively, you can use something like Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE, and ping via the radio between phones. This is a lot better for privacy's sake, but it still is not a very good distance estimator and therefore has issues estimating risk. And I'm going to focus on Bluetooth for the rest of this talk because it's currently the industry standard for automated contact tracing. But I really want to hammer home that it's a very poor distance estimator. Notably, it is reflected by urban materials such as metal, glass, and concrete, which distorts the signal in ways that make it very difficult to determine distance estimates from signal strength. And because this is a hard problem, for the rest of this talk, we're going to see if we can improve distance estimation and hopefully risk estimation in turn. Our contribution is collaboration among nearby phones to improve accuracy. If phones all share a little bit of locally derived information, then they can improve distance estimates across the board. But there's a number of ways you could collaborate, which each have their own trade-offs. So for example, you might share environmental information, such as if you're indoors or outdoors. If you're outdoors, it might affect your risk estimation. You might be less likely to catch an illness than if you're indoors. And furthermore, like I mentioned with Bluetooth, it might affect the way that your signal strength maps to distances. And going further down that line of Bluetooth reasoning, you might share more Bluetooth relevant information like broadcast mode, broadcast strength, or device model that's broadcasting. But this starts to infringe on the user privacy. For example, if a phone says it's an iPhone, the turtle might know that only the dolphin has an iPhone and can start to degrade its friends' privacies that way. And all along a different axis, you might communicate one time or multiple times for collaboration. There's a lot of different things you can do. But what we do in this work in CoCoT is we share Bluetooth-derived, locally made distance estimates and only communicate a single extra time. This does not require hardware, infrastructure, or additional user interaction. And we build on top of Google and Apple's exposure notification, or GAIN for short, which makes it easy for us to roll out CoCoT en masse, as well as gives us strong existing privacy guarantees via really nice cryptographic implementation of the protocol. And furthermore, we make all these choices to balance out our improvements in accuracy and mitigate the infringements on privacy, security, and battery uses as trade-offs. So I'll explain how automated contact tracing, as well as CoCoT works right here. I'll start with GAIN because we're built off that, and then I'll get into CoCoT. So first, phones will broadcast or chirp a cryptographically generated random number. In this case, the turtle's phone is shouting, "I am here," and the giraffe's phone is going to receive that. It's then going to locally compute a distance estimate to that other phone based off the received signal strength. In this case, the giraffe's phone thinks the turtle's phone is 9 feet away. Normally with GAIN, you would stop here, and GAIN would leave the phones with a noisy Bluetooth-derived distance estimate. But with CoCoT, we're going to continue onwards, and we're going to share or rebroadcast those locally derived distance estimates to neighbors. So the giraffe's phone is going to tell the turtle's phone, "I think you're 9 feet away," and vice versa, it's going to hear back, "I think you're 7 feet away." And the phones are then going to use those shared distance estimates to locally derive an improved distance estimate toward the other phones. Here, the giraffe's phone is just going to average the two distance estimates. And this is what we call the average out algorithm for secret reasons. But the intuition is just that more samples of the same distance are better because it will reduce variance. But there's a lot more sophisticated things we can do as well. Another one I'll show today is the spring mass algorithm. And this adds additional pairwise distance estimates from other devices to build a topology or graph or layout of people nearby, further constraining distances and making them more realistic. And this is based off the sort of canonical or classical physics problem where you have springs connecting masses of different lengths, different masses, and you try to find the orientation of those masses that minimizes the resting potential energy of the springs and masses. And this builds on top of the average out. I'll show that right now. Here we have the exact same examples before, but now we have an annotated 8 feet of distance estimate between the giraffe and the turtle, made with average out because it's made with 2 lines. And I'll show you how we can get to this triple line refined distance estimate with spring mass. The first thing we're going to see is that it's really rare that 2 users are interacting with each other just alone. Usually when one user sees another, they will usually be in a public environment with multiple other users nearby. And the giraffe's phone is going to communicate with these other users' phones normally and produce a averaged out distance estimate to them. The other thing we're going to point out is that when the turtle's phone and the dolphin's phone communicate, they're going to broadcast omnidirectionally with Bluetooth data advertisements and also send that information to the giraffe's phone. So the giraffe's phone is going to have a graph or a topology of the nearby users and their distances apart. And this sort of geometric view allows the giraffe's phone to see things that weren't previously visible. For example, this triangle between the giraffe, turtle, and dolphin does not satisfy the triangle inequality. It can't be drawn on a Euclidean surface. These sides of 2 feet and 3 feet sum up to less than the side of 8 feet. And similarly, this giraffe, flamingo, turtle triangle has the same issue, where 2 sides are smaller than the 3rd side. And the giraffe's phone might calculate that it's less likely that all 4 of the outside lines of this quadrilateral are wrong, and more likely that just this inside line of the quadrilateral are wrong, but at least one of them is wrong. And so it's going to update the line between itself and the turtle's phone accordingly and make a more realistic estimate to the turtle. And I'll remind you that these estimates are made with Bluetooth, and these large-scale adjustments are actually quite common. So in summary of these algorithms, each of our algorithms uses more information to produce better results. Gain here on the left, now annotated with purple, just uses one-way locally derived Bluetooth low-energy distance estimates. In our CoCoT collaborative algorithms, the average out uses a slightly improved 2-way distance estimate, and the spring mass uses an even more improved topological view of all the nearby devices. And the intuition being that each algorithm adds more information and improves the distance estimates accordingly. But how do we know that these actually do it other than our intuition? Well, we tested each algorithm's ability to reduce the distance estimate errors. Ideally, we want 0 feet or 0 meters of error, but we'll settle for as close to that as we can get. Ideally, our algorithms reduce this distance estimate error as much as possible. And we also need to verify that each of these algorithms satisfies our design constraints. Namely, it has to be private, not allowing an adversary to learn much about the user compared to existing solutions. It has to be secure, meaning an adversary can't influence a user's accuracy, and it can't consume too much extra battery than existing solutions. And in this talk, I'll talk about privacy, but for time's sake, I will leave out security and usability. But I encourage you to read our paper because there's a lot of interesting design decisions we have to make, such as when users maliciously broadcast intentionally false disinformation, or how we pack a lot of information into very small Bluetooth advertisements to minimize radio usage and therefore battery consumption. So in each of our tests, we took a real human interaction data set, sometimes real, and combined that with a Bluetooth data set to make a contact tracing data set. In one of those data sets, we had a cocktail party, which we took the data set's locations of 18 users as they enjoyed refreshments with each other. But since it didn't have Bluetooth, we added Bluetooth data to get a realistic sense of what contact tracing protocols might have seen during that party. Unfortunately, though, this real high-quality human interaction data is scarce, so we have to make a bunch of handmade canonical configurations as well. One of those is a banquet hall where lots of users are seated around round tables. Another is a cafeteria in a school style where users are seated around long rectangular tables, among others. And I'll show you those results on a probability distribution that's going to look like this. The vertical axis is the probability that a distance estimation technique makes the distance estimate error shown on the horizontal axis. 0 feet of error is ideal, meaning it got the correct answer. And as it goes to the right side or the positive axis, it means the distance estimator overestimated, and the left side means it underestimated, or there's a negative error. So a good error would look like this, sorry, a good curve would look like this green one, which is heavily centered at 0 feet of error and has very short tails that taper off quickly. Whereas a bad distance estimator would look like this red curve, which has a low chance of getting 0 and a high chance of getting a non-zero error with broad asymmetric tails. In terms of real data, here's what the current state of the art, which is Bluetooth with a couple other local sensors, looks like. It does a decent job of getting 0 feet of error, but it has these broad asymmetric tails, including some at 15 feet of overestimation. And this would be a false negative. So someone could be right next to you 2 feet away, and you would think they're not within a dangerous distance of you. This could harm users' trust in contact tracing systems. And in our work, CoCoT, the average out algorithm improves this, notably reducing these large bumps of estimation error near 15 feet and getting a better probability of having 0 feet of error. And spring mass improves upon this even further, having a higher yet probability of getting 0 feet of error and a tighter distribution around it. Numerically, this reduces the mean absolute error by about 28%. Now I'll talk about some of the privacy trade-offs that we have to make to accomplish this improvement. Let's say the giraffe is eavesdropping on nearby users and trying to see who's using the service. Normally, it would only be able to sense users within its immediate sensing radius. In this case, only the turtle is within the phone's Bluetooth radio sensing radius, and so only the turtle can be seen by the giraffe. But when we rebroadcast distance estimates, the giraffe's phone is now additionally aware of the turtle's phone's sensing area, effectively doubling its sensing area if the phones have roughly equal radio strength. This allows the giraffe to see another user nearby, which it wasn't previously able to see. But because we're built on strong existing cryptographic guarantees, the giraffe's phone only sees linkably anonymous users and can't see the true identity. There's ways that the giraffe can get around this, which are made easier by CoCoT, but these exist already with existing solutions, and the ease that CoCoT adds is insignificant. You can see more about that in our paper. So in summary, we propose collaboration among nearby phones to improve automated contact tracing's distance measurement accuracy, and do so by about 28%, therefore hopefully improving risk estimation accuracy as well. This builds on existing solution, meaning it doesn't require any additional hardware, infrastructure, nor user interaction, is easy to deploy, and gives us strong existing cryptographic guarantees. And we make these improvements with only small trade-offs to privacy, security, and battery consumption. Thank you for listening to the talk. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thank you.